Mm. Brilliant, brilliant. Hello, Ramsey. Hello, Ramsey. Hello, Ramsey. Wonderful, wonderful. Sorry, I was concentrating on sharing and adding it to the guide and things like that. Wonderful. Most marvelous, Ramsey. Most marvelous. How are you today, Ramsey? How are you today? I'm mellowish. I'm mellowish. Oh, some days are just different to others, which is quite amazing. All right, come on now. Facebook is just being tardy. There we go. There we go. There we go. Almost there. Almost there. Almost there. Good to see you, Ramsey. Good to see you. You doing good? Ah, brilliant. Brilliant. It's an interesting question. How are you today? Yeah, we ask people, right? Or just how are you? But there's that implication of today, yes, involved there. And and typically the replies will be, well, today I'm feeling this way, I'm feeling that way. But seldom do we consider this question to be, how have you chosen to feel today? That is very important. This is part of Way of Impeccability. There is a whole module on mood management, choosing your moods, being deliberate with your moods, etc. It all falls under energy management. And it's a very big deal, of course. So when we consider it in that light, it's a profound shift. Now, just imagine if you had, when you were a child, right, and you were brought up, instead of this assumption being entrained into you that we are feeling the way we feel because of some external reason. You woke up this way, the day's this way, something happened, whatever. But when you ask people, how are you? Their answer is a reaction to uh, how they have been feeling. And that implied reaction is that how they feel is caused by external circumstances, situation, things happening, whatever, right? There's not this awareness that, wait a second, how I feel is a function of my choices. This is very profound to me. It's a very, 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 very big deal. Yes, it's a massive big deal. And I don't know why this is not, well, I guess I do know why. But I should say, I see no reason why we cannot change this. All it is a new habit, a new mindset, a new awareness. And that is simply to say, wait a second, I choose. So for me, the question that I ask when I become aware of my moods and my feelings is, why am I continuing to choose to feel this way? Very particular question. It's got two key parts. Why am I continuing to choose to feel this way? Continuing and choose. Yes. So I say, well, you know, I may have I may have gotten this idea. Uh, wow, wow. My brother just posted on my timeline, Nobelia spelled with an I. It's happening. It's happening. I got to show you, Ramsey. Anyway, so why do we continue to choose? Because the continue is important. Because I may have fallen into a mood for who knows what reason, habits, metabolism, hormones, who knows, right? But do I have to continue to choose that way? No. I almost never wake up in a mood that I wish to continue with. Or mood is not necessarily the right idea, right phrase or term. I never wake up in a way. It's a way of being. My body somehow adjusts itself. It has its own ideas. So it's more of an attitude, a mindset. Yes, some mood, but it's all of them all put together. So just a way of being. I don't wake up in a way of being. I choose to continue. So I deliberately reset. It is part of my morning routine. It's first thing I do is reset myself. Before I even open my eyes, I reset myself. I choose. I choose. It's a deliberate act of choosing how I wish to be. And when we understand that this is something that we can do, everything changes, right? Now it's up to us, our choice. So I want to share here, right? So Nobelia is spelled with an E, but it doesn't matter. I mean, how do you pronounce this? Nobelia? No, that would be two L's. So it has to be pronounced Nobelia. Yeah, Nobelia. It can't be Nobelia, surely. It has to be Nobelia. But this is too fascinating. And projects, the building across the road from home. This is too incredible. This is too incredible. Wow. And that's something that is really amazing. That's really fascinating, isn't it, Ramsey? That there's this Nobelia project. So I have to look it up and see what it is. Need to know more. All right. Has anybody else joined? Has anybody else joined? See, I'm expecting you to speak in my ear, Ramsey, but all right. All right. let's let's get out of that and pay attention to what we're doing here, folks. Pay attention, boy. Pay attention. Stop messing about. I got to remonstrate with myself a wee tad. Yes. Some personal remonstration is quite appropriate every now and then. Pay attention. Self-personal remonstration is. Ramsey, let's see. You should set this as a logo to the sessions. Yeah, but it's with an I, not an E. Nobelia is spelled with an E, the planet. So, and I'll bet you anything, many will pronounce that Nobelia. So. Indeed, every day is the same to me. I keep myself energized all the time through different means. It is like I plugged myself to a charger. Exactly. My charger is a meditative state of mind. Yes. I let the adequate/appropriate, I would assume, hormones and fluids flow in my system. I killed my mood swings through repetition. Yes, it's just training. It's just practice. It's just habit. And it's emphasis also, of course, because we train the brain. So, when we can retrain the brain through counter emphasis and also particularly through the usage of de-emphasis. This is very powerful. This is very, very powerful. Understanding emphasis and de-emphasis, absolutely key and crucial to learning, growing, to everything. It's one of the most profound understandings there are, is how emphasis works. How emphasis works on the brain. It's a very, very, very big deal. Very big deal. I see Elizabeth and I see Norma online. So I'm assuming they're about to be coming. Yeah. Elizabeth is driving or at work, so it's tricky for her. But if she can come, she will come. She came on Zoom and we had a wonderful chat. It was most delicious, Elizabeth. Mm. Speak of the angel, and there she is. Good morning to you, Elizabeth. Good morning to you. Good morning to you. I was just saying how I so enjoyed hearing you and hearing your moreness and hearing the changes in you, hearing the depth. It's a beautiful thing. And also to confirm what I was saying the other day about your posts, that you are constantly thinking about these topics that we bring up. You evaluating them, you going over them, you figuring them out, you pulling them apart and putting them back together again. You're making sure you know it, you understand it for yourself, not as a memory, but as an understanding. This is a massive difference. Unfortunately, our learning is predicated and geared to, and it programs us this idea that no, we've got to memorize. No, nonsense, right? And like Jeopardy. Oh, they're so smart, those people on Jeopardy. Not necessarily. Yeah, some of them are, but they just have good memories. Yeah, like Rain Man in the classic movie. He was this fountain of trivial information. He knew everything, but he couldn't tie his shoelaces, right? He was a functional idiot. So memory is not where it's at. The ability to think, the ability to figure out, the ability to perspective shift, right? And the ability to mood shift, the ability to self-motivate, which is a consequence of mood shift. Now we start to get to where we're at. The ability to make things your own. Oh, now we really get there, because if you don't make it your own, you may remember everything, know everything, but you're going to be living somebody else's life. Totally useless. Yeah. I saw this with the psychology professors. They understood psychology. They knew psychology. They could tell you all about what, Jung or Freud or Adler or whoever did, right? But Maslow, the whole works. But did they live it? No. Their lives were a mess. Their personal lives were a mess. They were a mess as an individual. It was almost a meme, a trope. It was a stereotype. The psychology professors been kind of messed up. It was always the joke, well, that's kind of why they got into psychology, I guess. Right? The reason why is because of this assumption that knowing something in your memory will lead to change. So they kept learning more, kept adding more stuff to their hard drives, to their database, and it made no difference at all. Why? Because they didn't understand without application, it's all meaningless. The psychology professors were absolute cliches of proof of that. Without application, it means nothing. And it's very amazing, very, very, very amazing. It's truly something, truly, truly something. Yeah. It's very powerful. So my point is, Elizabeth, you, through this constant thinking it through and application in your personal life, right? That application that leads to real change because it's made your own. And then you go, you test it, you see how it's working. And then when you say, oh, I can apply this, I am doing this, it is working for me. I've got self-proof that I know it. And then we get real lasting change, right? There's a whole sequence to it. It's really powerful. So it was a joy to hear, Elizabeth, a true joy to hear. And the other part is When we acknowledge the ability to learn, it's a profound shift in our lives. You might say, but, so what are you talking about? When we acknowledge the ability to learn, don't we all do this? No, 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 no. Yeah, we acquire things and it becomes our own. And mostly what people do is just regurgitate what they kind of sort of know already, that they've glommed onto themselves from here, there, and everywhere. Acknowledging the ability to learn is also being humble about the fact that we don't know, that we need to learn, that we want to learn, etc. And that we are open to hearing what others have to say. Learning from others is not the same thing as being open to what they have to say. That receptivity, we take it in, we process it, we put it through the mill of ourselves, as you've been doing, Elizabeth, and then we come with a product. But we have to be open to hear in the first place. And that's what I mean. Most people aren't open to learn, because when you're truly open to learn, you hear. But then it goes further than that. You don't just take it in and add it to yourself, which is mostly what they do. A little bit here, a little bit there, because they don't want to acknowledge any one source. Sometimes you get people who do that and they latch onto a guru or whatever. And how far does that get them? Not. I know many people who've been involved with this one and that one, follow this, and then it sort of fades after a while, and then they go elsewhere, or they read the new book or whatever. It never lasts because there's not that application through making it your own and eventually self-proof, right? Through application. So it's very powerful, very powerful. I just wanted to say that I really appreciate the fact that you are open and receptive. It is a very profound thing. I don't want anybody to just believe me. No. Don't believe what a word I say. Think about it. Come back and say, yeah, but what about this? What about that? Ah, that's a good point. Ah, that makes sense. Why does it make sense? It makes sense because of this. See, it's not just about agreement or disagreement. It's about discussion, understanding, moreness, sharing, and say, man, I liked what you said and I used it, but it came out a little differently for me. It's like, wow, yeah, this worked for me. And then you see, all of that we learn because I say, oh yeah, I never thought to add that little tweak to it. Very cool. So this sharing, this discussion is a profound thing. So I'm really enjoying it with you too, Ramsey, of course, you know. It's just that I noticed specifically because I of course, know Elizabeth from a few years already, and she did Way of Impeccability. We never got all the way through, but it didn't matter. We didn't need to, because you took all the core of it, which was the key points of thinking it through to the end, application, perspective shifting. That's all that's needed, really, right? So the others are finer points that you can figure out for yourself as we go along, right? So it doesn't matter. And of course, things change. You have to move and all that. So all good. You know, that's why I'm saying I'm just appreciating Elizabeth. I don't mean to, there's no comparison involved, Ramsey. It's just that I am able to make that assessment. Yes. And I'm enjoying how Elizabeth learns from what we're doing. It's a very powerful thing. And it's something that remind me when we come to the end of the session, or before we come to the end of the session. I want to stop a little bit earlier, and maybe in the last half an hour or so, to say, what have we learned today? What have we learned today? This to me is something I do intrinsically. It's a default. It's part of the new nobility way of living also. You know, at least uh, in that psychology, but it's definitely part of Way of Impeccability to always say, what have I learned? What have I learned? Whenever I read something, whenever I engage in something, always ask myself, it's the takeaway. It is the inherent psychology behind the takeaway, the philosophy of takeaway. It's, I think, module 2, session 1, something like that in Way of Impeccability, right? The philosophy of takeaway. What have I learned? What can I take away from myself? I want to do this more specifically and deliberately. I think it would be very valuable for all of us, right? Um, uh, all right, let me just see where Norma is. Bina has been offline for a while. So I'm assuming that something is happening there. They had that cyclone that was approaching them. I don't know what happened to it, but that was landfall was like last Thursday already. So I would assume that that's not an issue anymore. But you never know with this kind of stuff. So, all right, all right, all right. Let me set up. And I'm assuming, Elizabeth, that you are well this morning also. Today you've chosen to be well. You've chosen to be more. You've chosen to enjoy yourself. You've chosen to appreciate yourself and life and the moreness of everything and the magic of everything. I woke up with two little hummingbirds in the trees nearby. Now, where I'm at, well, I was sleeping outside in the hammock, which was really nice. So I can see from the hammock, see the trees. Now, most of the trees are not liked by the birds because they call them paradise trees. And they're not particularly popular because they have a smell to them and so there are no insects in the trees. And of course, no insects, no birds, right? Which we don't think of, but this is a big factor. So those trees are avoided by the birds for the most part. But in amongst it was a other tree, I don't know what the name of it is, and it has little flowers. So the hummingbird was there. So I was watching there, and I said, oh, wait a second, there's a second little hummingbird coming on there. And they sit on one particular spot on the tree, at least one of them does, which I find most intriguing because I saw them there the other day. So this was kind of fun, this first thing, wake up, it was starting to get light already because it gets light fairly early now. So yeah, I saw the little hummingbird. I could just see it through the little gap in the tree there. One little tiny spot, little hummingbird sitting there. And then the other one came and they were flitting about. And then you could hear them cheeping, which I've seen many hummingbirds many times before, but I never heard them cheep because they weren't close enough, right? So I only heard this the other day that one came right outside the window on the other side of the fly screen. And, I could have reached out and touched it. So, of course, they don't see me because of the way the light works. But they were cheeping quite loudly because it was close, you see, and you hear them. So it's very interesting to me. Then now I know what to listen for. But other than that, it's a sound that's very easy to get lost. So I could kind of hear them. They seem to be very happy and having fun. We don't know what they're up to. We just assume a lot of times when we hear birds cheeping, they may be arguing for all I know, but I'm assuming that they were happy and enjoying life, right? It always fascinates me that hummingbirds are so tiny, but they can move so fast. And they can't be consuming huge, great quantities of food at a time because they're very tiny. So their ability to generate energy from the little bit that they take in, this is profound to me. I mean, if you watch them, they'll move great distances relative to their bodies, just like almost instantly. I mean, if you think of the same ratio, right, of distance, and that they're moving just like that, they're moving 20, 30, 40, 50 meters, right? And then back again, it's like, wow. I mean, if I had to do that, that would probably be the equivalent of, I don't know, how many times bigger am I than a hummingbird? A couple of eyes would be like 5,000 meters, maybe 50,000 meters. See what I mean? That even if I were to go slowly, it would take me a lot of energy. Never mind flying. So it's just absolutely fascinating, the energy conversion process and the efficient usage of energy. It's really amazing to me. Absolutely incredible. Energy is such a big deal in everything we do. So when you start becoming aware of energy, it sort of makes you think a little bit about things. And it's very cool. It's very cool. All right, let's start going over things because there's much to go over. Just sharing, what's on my mind. It's sort of again something that I do on a regular basis, and typically Bina's been on Zoom already for a while, and we chat about stuff like this. It's just I always ask, what have you been thinking about? What have you, and you'll be amazed at what comes up in that. It's a true awesome joy, and it's a great delight to ask such questions, for me especially, because when we really stop to hear what people have been thinking about, it's a very big deal. So I'm always keen to know from you guys, by the way, what have you been thinking about? What's on your heart? What's been going on inside there? So I'm keen to hear, it's hard to type out sometimes because it's deep and it's complex stuff and it's connected. And sometimes it was all clear when we were thinking about it, but then as you start saying it, and then you have to. That's that difference between expression and thinking, right? And so now when you start to express it, it's not quite as clear as you thought it was, and then we have to redo it. and not redo it, but we come to realize that there's a bit more work to be done. And then the discussion starts, of course, and then more comes because there's input, and now you're in a wonderful space. It's something truly profound and magical and very valuable. All right, where are we? Where are we? So please share, please share. And Elizabeth, if you have any questions or comments on the pre-course on how to take Wave Impeccability and Moreness Project courses and programs, please ask. You know what? This is a publicly available course, right? This is open to anybody. Now, whether you're going to do Wave Impeccability or not, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're going to actually do one of the Wave Impeccability or do Wave Impeccability, one of the Moreness Project courses or programs. The information in this is valuable, right? It's learning how to learn. And understanding what makes learning. So it's a very powerful, very valuable thing. Ramsey, I'd be very interested to know what your thoughts and perspectives on it are. There's lots of information in this. I mean, you can just skip the first part, which is the program promises, and go into the second and the third parts. The second part is the techniques and methodologies that I utilize to make sure that people get value from the course, that there's actual value, real value. And then the last part is sort of bonus understanding on things like emphasis and so on, right? And perspective shifting, thinking it through to the end, and the core tools that make for two. So there's a lot in this. It's not all that long, but there's a ton of valuable stuff in there. Very magical, very magical. No, I shouldn't say magical. It's just, this is, it's all thought through to the end, and it's there because there's been a ton of usage of that, and it's come about via application, right? So it's not just idly come by. It works, and there's a deep understanding to it that underlies it all. So it's a big deal. It's a big deal. It's sophisticated as well, right? I come back to Comelius, the delegates, Comelius. And with this energy I was talking about, right? And when we understand that the universe is inherently energy, paying attention to this is important, but also our relationship to that energy. And we thus are also ultimately energy. Yeah. Very, very useful. I mean, there's a lot to this quote here, as we're going to see a little bit as we go through. There's a bit more. Comelius, one of the delegates from the classic intellectual world, subtly cleared his throat at just exactly the right moment of intensity and volume, an opening to be ignored or responded to. Biella was keen for input. Comelius had a penetrating intellect. She wanted to hear what he had to say. Besides, he seemed to have hidden sides not often expressed. Biella was keen to draw those out. That's where one really connected. So just even in this one little slide, brilliant, Ramsey. Even this one little slide, there's much implied, right? So first of all, Comelius is implying that he's not just a sort of an ordinary fellow, that he's paying attention to being considerate, right? He has good manners. He's a bit thoughtful, right? And he's aware of appropriateness. Now, does that mean he's aware of appropriateness in general? Not necessarily. He may just be wanting to make sure that he doesn't make a fool of himself. So there may be some ego involved here, right? And these classic intellectual worlds, they are essentially university worlds. There's just a couple of them, but he's from one of them, right? The whole world is built around the studying universities, essentially. Yes, they have agriculture, but they've also gotten to the point of, automation and mechanization. So this is it. You either become, like many societies, you either like in South Africa, right? Many of the societies there, or the cultures there, like the Zulu, for instance, traditionally, not anymore now, of course, but back in the day, when you were a boy, you took care of the cattle. If you're a woman, you worked in the fields. If you're a man, you joined the army. You were in the military. That's it. Those were your choices. End of story. There were a couple of odd exceptions, I guess, like you want to be the Ngoma, which the term for the shaman, stuff like that. There's always exceptions to every system. But essentially, that was it. You had these very well-defined roles, very limited. So societies can exist where everybody essentially does one thing. Like the men were all in the military, all of them, right? And the boys looked after the cattle, women took care of the fields and the children and everything. It's just amazing. Not the greatest deal for the woman, of course, but so on these classic intellectual worlds, or the university worlds, it's like, fine, you want to study, if not, fine, you go and work in the fields. Well, they don't have fields in this, but essentially you do the more regular mundane work, which is, some people are happy, they don't want to do all the lecture stuff, they have no interest in it whatsoever. So you're supervising machinery, at least at this point in their development. I mean, when they started way back when, after the crash of the spaceships, they had technology then already, and they had computers. So there's a massive start, but you do have to start, in a little bit more basic, in your farming methodologies. You have the resources to say what to do and how to do it and so on. So you're going to develop a lot faster. But anyway, so just that, to add a little bit of background there. But the bigger point here was that he's making an effort to be a bit deliberate. Right now, we don't know his motivations yet. Like I said, it could just be profound consideration and politeness, as it would be if this was Biella or a new noble, or he could just be making sure that he gets attention and he doesn't make a fool of himself. So it could be a bit of ego or some combination, right? And an opening to be ignored or responded to. So it can go either way, right? So he's leaving himself out, in other words, right? If it is a bit of ego involved there, or it's a politeness, if not, right? Either way, and or combination again. And this point that Biella says, that hidden sides not often expressed. Biella was keen to draw those out. That's where one really connected. Now, look at us in our connections here. Yes, we are connecting to those. They're not necessarily hidden, but they are not necessarily either generally exercised. Yes, they're not out there. So those sides of us that don't see the light of day all the time, simply because, well, the superiority paradigm doesn't allow for them, doesn't make room for them, is not very kind to them. But that's where one really connects, when you get past those surface layers, right? The barriers. Our society, unfortunately, is not like the new nobility society. It does not lend itself to connecting on the fullness of others, right? Or with our own fullness to the fullness of others. And this is one of the magics of Nobelia and the whole new nobility society, is this connecting to the fullness, the moreness of you, right? All of you. It's a very big deal. So, by the way, just the slides too. I think you see my background today. Parks and this. It's a massive part of Nobelia. Yeah, they hang out outside for the most part. It's an oral culture. They see all these little places they get up where you hang out in this, right? So it's just a cool, different way of living. Yes, they have very benign weather there. That's a long story. The weather. She'd chosen the small, intimate garden of interlocution, ideal for the particular interaction with the delegate she had in mind. Comelius, she prompted. Comelius straightened slightly, cleared his throat again. All right, so Biella's paying attention. She noticed that Comelius had made this opening, and now she's assisting him, because she's obviously taking the lead there, being set as being the one to show the delegates. So she's the host, as it were, much like when many come on to Zoom and I'm the host. Yeah, you have to say, okay, please speak, say, ask questions, right? You have to guide the conversation to some sense, and not where it goes, but just activate, deactivate, and so on, right? Manage is the better word. Manage the interactions. So this is what she's doing here. She's managing. Comelius straightened slightly, clearing his throat again. His eyes swept across the group, checking. His efforts to be considerate evident. That's a really good sign. His efforts to be considerate evident. He had something to say. Biella leaned forward, placing her full attention on Comelius. Biella's cueing. Yes, capital C, cueing. She's cueing with her whole body to say, I want to hear what you have to say. She doesn't, she knows Comelius a little bit from before, but they haven't necessarily interacted in this, well, not in that type of environment before. So she's letting everybody know that if you have something to say, she wants to hear what you have to say. So it's not only for Comelius, it's for everybody else as well. It's a small, subtle thing, but because it's done deliberately, there's many implications to it, right? And she is being deliberate in her care, her consideration. She wants to make sure that those around her know this. And her just saying, I want to hear what you have to say, is not nearly as powerful as the subtle cueing. She's demonstrating her clear intent and interest. Yes. He glanced around the group, commanding their attention. I enjoyed that. He's talking about the story about the new nobles and the word, the name agglomeration, how they got that to be accepted. There's a lot there, and it all unfolds rather mysteriously. Yet I feel like I know the new nobility. Very interesting statement from Comelius. I mean, I suppose, I don't know. For me, I don't quite see how he sees that it was all unfolding rather mysteriously. I suppose in a sense that they knew what the others were likely thinking, and then, because they think in the same way. Because when you really practice thinking things through to the end result, you may take different paths, but you end up at the top of the same mountain, right? So it's like, what's the difference? And when you're standing at the top, you can see the different paths going down. You see, so it's not that mysterious, but it may seem that way, I guess. Yet I feel like I know the new nobility. He says this as a statement and he doesn't elaborate, which is really fascinating, right? And we'll see how much he does know them or not as this comes along, right? And we're going to be a little surprised at this statement. There's just something here that I'll throw in. I'm always debate whether to add this in or not, but I do think it adds much to the story. Now, Comelius is a fictional character, yes, and Comelius has his own personality. However, Comelius's dialogue comes from a very real person, and they didn't know they were involved in the story necessarily. So how this came about is I was writing the story and I shared it with my friend, right? And so this is the comments in chat, right? This was all done via chat, right? No Zoom back then. So I shared the story with him and he read it. This is the previous chapter, and this is exactly what he said. Right, I didn't change a word of his typing, right? Nothing. So all of Comelius's dialogue is my dialogue, and some of Biella's then becomes her responding to um, to her friend. Although there's a bit added in with her dialogue, obviously, because she's also responding to the others, right? But this conversation now, it changes completely, because the real life person is responding to the story, right? Whereas they are engaged in the discussion. So the context changes much of what my friend says. And I call this technique, it's take a conversation and I enfold it into the story. So you end up with something else entirely, even though the original one had its own logic to it, right? And it's very cool. I love doing it. I mean, it's a peculiar skill, I guess. I don't really know if anybody else does this. I've never known of it or seen it. It's just a fun thing I like to do, because I like real dialogue as much as I can get it. Now, obviously, like Ursula, she's a complete character made up just for me, so none of hers is like that. But there are a few other characters where this also has, where it's real conversation taken and put into a different context, and it ends up with kind of different implications and different meanings. But I didn't change one word of his conversation. That's just my own little extra degree of difficulty to see if I can make it work without changing a single word. So sometimes he says some odd things a little bit, but that's okay. It's part of the fun, right? And if you actually listen to people, and really, really listen to people, like get a transcript of what they say, and you read their transcript, you say, oh, what were they saying? Yeah. It's fascinating how we say things that don't always add up and fit. So he says, yet I feel like I know the new nobility. We'll see, Comelius, we'll see. I feel like I've been in that kind of situation before, where complete autonomy can lead to consensus when thought through to the end. Right, now here he is connecting to the new nobility, right? So because it was mentioned before in the previous story, Biella says that she mentions or thinks it as well that, and of course he's now read those thoughts, but doesn't matter. She also says it, that uh, there's each new noble has complete autonomy. They absolutely act as individuals. There's no leadership. There's no guidance, and any individual new noble can act on behalf of the nobility. That's a very profound thing. Now, of course, you're not going to lightly do that, but when circumstances presses you, you won't be a new noble unless every other new noble trusts you to have the sobriety, the sensibility, the thoughtfulness, the care, the consideration, the nobility, everything, the appropriateness to make an appropriate decision. Yes. Now, will you be necessarily fully informed? No, not necessarily. Will you make the effort to be fully informed? Of course, this is impeccability. This goes without saying. Impeccability underlies the whole culture, right? So how can you not trust somebody like that? There wouldn't be a new noble otherwise, right? This is it. It's very simple. This is very, very simple. And of course, all of the new nobility are honest to a fault. So somebody might say, well, I'm in a position where I need to make a decision, but this is really technical stuff, and I don't know much about technology. And then you'll go and you'll find somebody who is. And you see, they know their limitations. So they're not going to make decisions that are going to be not taking their limitations into account. So it's a very simple system and very, very profound. But this is saying, though, in a situation where complete autonomy, he doesn't specify this, but it's implied, the autonomy of all the individuals, right? So each individual is autonomous. They can act individually. However, it leads to a consensus when things are thought through to the end. So he's leaving out a few things here because he's kind of thinking out loud, right? So yes, exactly. When you think it through to the end, you come to the same conclusion. Like in that case, they all practiced extrapolation. They practiced anticipation. They thought it through to the end. Well, if this keeps getting vetoed, all these names for the agglomeration, we're not going to have a name. If we don't have a name, there is no agglomeration. Even though everybody's agreed to all of the finer points, the charter and the constitution, things like that, right? So all of what is involved in this, it all goes to naught, even though it's all been agreed upon without the name. It's amazing. It's such a simple, trivial, childish thing. But all of the work that's probably taken months or even years to come about will fall apart. Now, actually, what had happened there, just a little bit of back history here, is that, like I said before, right, all the spaceships crashed, and on the one planet where the originator of the whole project and not just the Seeding the Stars project, but also the Noble Ideal and the new nobility, right, where that individual was also on that same spaceship were the inventors and the engineers of the great gravity engines, right? Because this is very precious information that has to stay close to home, and they all realize this, they're all aware of it, they understand the logic of it. So this is the core of what later becomes the new nobility, right? Now, other planets independently would evolve along the same lines, but this is where the root of it is. And of course, here's where the first rebuilt starship or spaceship and gets rebuilt over time when they have the resources to be able to develop the machinery and so on. So they know it's going to take a while, but they plan for it, right? So it takes a good long while because You may have the plans and the knowledge to do something, but you don't necessarily have the ability to make the machinery, the engineering, and all that, right? That takes a long time to develop. It requires industry and economy and stuff, right? And they're aware of this. So, but after however long it takes, a century or two, when they are finally able to build this, the starship, then they start connecting with other planets, right? And then they form, because they can't go too far and too much because they don't have the resources for everything, so they made little groupings, right? And then they also discovered that some of the aliens, right, had made local groupings of where the planets were close enough for regular starships to go, at least the solar systems, right? Like our nearest solar systems, Alpha Centauri, which is 4.5 light years away, which means that if you're going to travel at the speed of light, which is impossible, it'll take you 4.5 years to get there, right? But even if you could manage half the speed of light, now it's taking you 9 years to get there, right? So, but if you had another solar system that was a lot closer, where it realistically would only take maybe a year or two's worth of travel, well, then you could join. And that did happen, right? That these smaller little local communities that were within the range of conventional space travel. So then, when this first planet, when they started to go with the great gravity engine, and they made their own mini local, in at least in that corner of the galaxy, the nearest solar systems, which happened to be others where crashes were. And then they discovered these others, and they said, okay, well, let's join together. So there was a loose confederation of planets already. But then they started to say, hey, you know what, there's of course a lot more. And they really started to make an effort to connect to all of it, and not only from the Starship crash one, but all the alien planets too. So then they started to say, we there's a lot more, yeah, and this is bigger now. There's groups that are joining together, right? And we need all of these different groups plus individual planets coming together into this whole big thing, which is taking up a very big part of the planets in the galaxy, or at least habitable, systems. So that's where the need for an agglomeration came about, right? So it's a very appropriate term too. So anyway, just some backstory there. I don't know how much the backstory makes a difference, but it's kind of fun, I guess. So what Comelius says is very powerful, though. When you think things through to the end, you come to consensus by autonomy. It's a profound thing, and this is what I enjoy when I hear you guys' comments, right? I see you, like some of the comments that I put in as quotes and things. That's somebody thinking it through to the end and coming to a consensus. The expression is different, but the underlying concept is the same, right? The understanding is the same. That's the power of abstract understandings. In the end, they're all the same. Doesn't matter the language or the path that you use to get there. And Comelius goes on to say, although I don't think you said this, a greater and more reliable order is in play, which, when it ceases trying to impose order and instead follows order. Now, this is a just ridiculously remarkable comment from Comelius. Yes. And it's a deeply intuitive comment. And it's why I love my friend who this is based on. I don't think they're on Facebook anymore, but this is an incredible comment from them, because what he is noticing is attunement. Yes. And attunement is, now let's go back to our starting slide, right? The first quote here. To me, the energy which is the universe has an intent. Therefore, it is intent. The therefore is a little bit, you can say, well, I don't quite see why it's a therefore, but nonetheless, it just, this is the quote. It's a mystery, right? Well, you would think that the energy, if that energy has an intent, right? When you have an intent, you put all your energy into the intent. You don't kind of leave a little bit to your side and say, no. So if you have an intent, which is a big deal intent, all your energy is going to go into it. And therefore that energy is the intent. That's the logic, right? So, but the point is that the universe is intent, in other words. And we think of dark matter as being the profoundness. Okay. Now suddenly it takes on a whole different logic. And intent is an order, is it not? If I have just raw energy and I'm just full of energy, I'm full of energy. But when I have an intent, that energy becomes focused. It has order. Yeah. So there it says, although I don't think you said this, a greater and more reliable order is in play. That's intent. When it ceases trying to impose order and instead follows order. So the intent of the universe doesn't say you have to do it this way, you have to do it that way. It's just the intent, and things then follow the order of that intent without anything specifically being imposed. However it works is how it works. Yes. So this is how we come to attunement, because attunement is us connecting to and associating with universal intent. This is what attunement is. Yes. It is paying attention to the whole world so that we can figure out the divine, understand what universal intent is, and go along with it. And the overall universal intent is the intent to awareness, obviously, because this is the start. Without awareness, you lost, right? But we can say, though, there's maybe sub-intense consequences from that, right? So we're looking to be attuned so that we can be as energy efficient as possible, right? The more attuned you are, the less of your own personal energy you need to use that. It's like sailing, right? The more attuned you are to the wind, the better you go, and maybe the less you have to paddle or row or whatever, right? So attunement is this. It makes us easier to do this, like paddling on the river in the stream, right? The more in the flow you are, the less you have to paddle. So very simple. That's attunement. Biella thinks, yeah, not sure exactly, not sure what he means exactly, but I'll hold off and see. Likely it will become clear later. This is Biella's thought is not strictly speaking necessary for her to think here, but from an author point of view, this is here to let the reader know that if you don't understand, don't worry, just chill, just relax, it'll come clear later. Yes. And that's most stories are like that. I particularly noticed this when reading Shakespeare. And I really do enjoy Shakespeare, and I've read Shakespeare's complete works twice. And I noticed this in Shakespeare. And Shakespeare did it very specifically and very deliberately, because in the time of Shakespeare, what he did was write things in such a way that at first you had no clue what he was saying, but then later he made it very, very clear and obvious. Because in the day of Shakespeare, we had the Globe Theatre. He was writing for his patrons, which was the nobility and the royalty and all the rich people, right? And they supported him and gave him money, and they came to the Globe Theatre. But the Globe Theatre, at least where he was principally, was also a somewhat democratic institution, or not somewhat, quite considerably so. That the hoi polloi, which is just a fancy term for ordinary people, which I love. Sometimes you can say to somebody, if they don't know what it means, say, you truly are hoi polloi, and they'll say, oh, thank you. Yeah. Anyway, just some fun. So the masses would come and they would attend it too, right? Because it's entertainment. There's not much entertainment in those days, obviously. And so he had to write for the highfalutin ones to make them feel all self-important, right, and make them feel good. And he wrote it in a way that okay, this is for you, but then he said it very clearly and very plainly, and he made very crude jokes. A lot of Shakespeare can be very crude and very basic for what became later known as the peanut gallery, because they would sell peanuts to eat in the shelves, right? And so those ones, they're rough people, right? I mean, they just, and so if they didn't like stuff, they would throw the shells onto this at the actors on the stage. And this is where the term peanut gallery and comments from the peanut gallery, which is, the meaning, comments from the peanut gallery, it's not very informed, it's kind of extra, it's nonsense really, and that's where it comes from, right? But Shakespeare wrote this way very specifically, that things are complicated at first and then it gets said very clearly afterwards. And this is very powerful, because When you have the fancy way of saying it, you get the moreness there. And the simple way of saying, yes, it makes sense because you've already heard the complex. And now it's like, duh. But if you started off with that duh, it would be an incomplete picture because it is incomplete, right? It's just putting it together. It's just a collection. It's just a summation. It's not the full explanation. So when you add it all together, it's a very profound way of doing things. And this comes out in stories many times automatically from authors. They don't even try and do it, right? So it's a very cool way of doing things, but it happens automatically sometimes. And you'll see with the poorer writers, they try start with that simple and explain, and then it just gets complicated and doesn't work, right? Comelius could get technical, academic, and sometimes hard to understand, but it didn't matter. And that's really true. My friend was an actual philosophy lecturer at one point, right? To teenagers, rather interestingly enough. Like troubled teenagers, he would teach them philosophy. It was a really fantastic thing. At least he'd done many things in his life, but that was the last sort of regular long-term paid thing that he did. Biella understood the value of contrast and intuitive input, both which Comelius provided in abundance. Absolutely. A very contrasting, very complex character, Comelius and my friend, both amazingly complex and layered and leveled, like all of you, just wonderfully, a lot of depth there, a lot of moreness, right? Like all you guys, all of you. Often the actual content of his comments could be ignored entirely. That's quite a thing to be saying there. Yeah. The content, the actual content, the meaning, the intent, however, that's a different story, right? And the value of the contribution. Sometimes when you say something, doesn't matter what you say, the fact that you are saying something at that time makes a difference, right? This didn't mean his contributions to the discussions were any less valuable. Comelius continued. What wasn't clear to me was just how the actions of the new nobility within the conference did not rise to the level of manipulation. So this is the same issue that Ursula brought up that hasn't been clarified yet. Yeah. Ursula says, yeah, but it was manipulation. She said it as a statement. And then she added, yeah, well, guidance maybe. And then Biella sort of has said, well, yes, it is, but it isn't, right? So now we're going to see. We're going to have this clarification, at least. Their actions may have been spontaneous and not pre-planned, although they were forthcoming about it immediately afterwards. Still, perhaps explained, but I just did not hear. How was this not a manipulation of the deliberative process? So he asks the essential question. Precisely what Biella had wanted. Comelius seemed to have more. He was holding back. He's inviting me to elaborate. Splendid. Yes, which is what she wants. But in this context, they start to work together without saying so, because they both understand there is a deeper intent here, and her intent to show what the new nobility are about and to also communicate moreness to the delegates. Comelius is aware of this, so he's assisting in this sense, right? That's an excellent question, Biella asserted. It was a manipulation, and it wasn't. Biella let that hang for a second. Not an easy nuance to explain. She wanted to make sure of presenting the explanation thoroughly. Great care was needed. This type of explanation always much better done one-on-one. Why is it so much better one-on-one? Because you can get feedback and you can adapt your explanation to the preciseness of what the individual needs, right? So it's like we're taking a journey and we're going from one city to another, right? Now, you can take the most direct route as the crow flies, but there may be mountains and rivers in the way. So yes, it may be technically the shortest, but it's not the easiest, right? And then you may take the easiest, but that's the longest, and then you find some common. In other words, there's a dozen different routes with all different choices. That's how it is with explanations. So you can adjust. Okay, we're going on the direct route. I'm with a bunch of people who are mountain climbers. Fine, we can climb over the mountains. All right, no problem. So you adjust. One-on-one, you can tailor-make the route to understanding to the individual. It's much harder to do with groups, much harder to do with groups, right? Especially if you're not getting feedback, right? And so the delegates, some of them are just flat out politicians, right? dyed-in-the-wool, lifelong politicians. They don't want to give anything away. They want to reserve all their power. So they're not going to let you know what works and what doesn't work, because that's just how their thinking is. It's the habits that they're entrenched in. She wanted to make sure of presenting the explanation thoroughly. Right? This better done one-on-one. The central tenet of the new nobility is appropriateness, Biella said. Appropriateness with awareness. Coupled to that is the most exquisite ethics. I say exquisite because it's a topic of most fine and extensive discussions among the new nobility. Conversation on the most minute and detailed application of ethics can go on for weeks sometimes. And if you hang out long enough in this environment here, we are going to have plenty such discussions, right? You'll see it's a big deal, right? And we may not be saying it under the topic of ethics directly, but it's under the topic of I'm struggling with this, how to behave in the situation, what is appropriate here. These are all when impeccability is at the root of a discussion, ethics is automatically the topic. Yeah? It just becomes it, right? Because way of impeccability is fundamentally ethical. Yes, and it cannot be any other way. When we understand the best use of energy is to be ethical, the two are linked. Impeccability, ethics, intrinsically linked. You can't unlink them. Yeah. So please share comments here, guys. Questions, comments, input. What appeals to you, what makes sense, what's interesting to you, anything. And of course, you guys want to come on Zoom, you're more than welcome. You know that, right? It's our custom to never leave a discussion until resolution is achieved. Capital R, resolution. I can't emphasize this enough, right? This is a dictionary of power term, capital R, resolution. And coming to resolution is a very big deal in the new nobility culture, and of course part of way of impeccability. Think of it this way. If you don't come to resolution, how is this a good use of your energy? All the efforts you put into figuring things out, if you don't come to resolution, all just wasted. Yeah. Best use of energy. Have to come to resolution. Have to. No matter how long it takes, you have to. You don't want to give up on that energy that you've invested. You don't want to waste it. Yeah. So coming to resolution is a big deal. Plus, if you have this deep desire to know and connect to more, you have to have resolution so that you can use the thing. I can't use it until it's finished being figured out. Yeah. Until it's resolved. It's like we're building a car and I haven't resolved how to get the steering to work. Oh, never mind. It's 90% done, the car. Let's go driving. Fine. It works very well for the straight line that we're driving on. And we come to the first corner, we can't turn, and that's the end of that. See? So sometimes things can work, but without the full resolution, they aren't going to work in all situations, and they're going to break down at some point. Yeah. So this is very key. It's very, very key to understand that we can't get going. We can't start driving that car until we've come to resolution on the key issues, right? On the thing, right? Like the steering or whatever. It's very important, and very important that we understand this, because we can easily get fooled into driving those cars, right? And for the most part, sometimes you say, well, I just drove it in straight lines. I never need it anymore. And it sort of works. Yeah, it works. But still, it's not fully resolved. Yes. Just because you happen to only need to drive in straight lines, it doesn't mean that your car is a complete car. It's not resolved, right? So we have to be careful with this, because, of course, now it works for a while, and then you suddenly have to turn, and now suddenly the thing that you relied upon, that you believe is functional and viable, doesn't work. And then if you're not aware of this point of resolution, you now have severe psychological conflict, because, hey, how come, what's going on? Why am I being punished? What's wrong? All sorts of assumptions come into it, right? And because the thing was working and now it's not working, you don't know why. Yeah. So this is a big point, psychologically, a very big point, very deep point. Yeah. So this coming to resolution, in terms of utilizing your energy, there's a deeper part to it. Yes. If I don't come to a resolution, how do I take this thing that's unresolved, and how can it be a part of building something greater? It cannot. It cannot. Yes. If your building blocks aren't complete, how do you build something substantial? However, if you do make an effort to come to resolution, you now can use this to build other things with. And this is profound. I mean, just think of engineering, and science, yeah? But engineering especially, right? If the parts weren't tried and true and tested, if you're building with faulty parts, how do you build any complex machinery? It just becomes impossible. It's just totally ridiculous, yeah? So engineers will test and test. Good engineers, they always make sure that the parts are viable, yeah, so that you can build things with them, yeah. Flawed parts going to kill your entire machine, right? Tiny little flawed part, kill your whole machine. So it's a very, very big deal. This. So we need to think like engineers when it comes to concepts, because concepts also build on each other. They work together, they interact, etc. Right? And then too, we have to do stress testing. Right. Okay. So this cog works fine and well, but it never had any real stress on it. I'm going to be using this cog, which basically it was just doing its own little thing. It's just a cog and it was just spinning around for fun. It didn't really matter, right? It just was a cog. But now I'm going to put it in this big machine and it's going to have real heavy pressure on it. I better make sure that it can handle that pressure. Yes. So even though something is resolved in its own field, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work when combined with other things. So that's another, part of impeccability, is to test, to check, to make sure, right? Good engineers, they will test the parts, stress test them. Yeah. So we need to do the same with our conceptions. We need to have engineer mindset when it comes to conceptions. I wish to emphasize, capital E, emphasize, this is a matter which is not only paramount, but is intensely and extensively explored. Right? This matter of not leaving discussions to the end. Those explorations are in no way theoretical, as I was just saying. They get tested, right? Biella paused for a second. Good, they're paying attention. She wants to make sure that she is communicating. She's very diligent in her task. One of the central themes underlying awareness is the strategic application of ethics. Strategic application, right? It's not the only way you can have ethics, but if you don't strategically apply your ethics, like in anything, yes, it's always contextual. Yeah. So if you don't apply this strategically, you're wasting your time. What a magical joy. Giving up your own agenda. Yes, we have to be willing to do so. Elizabeth is in the house. Elizabeth is in the house. Yeah, I want to just have a little bit of just fun there. I need to just adjust your name a little bit. Yeah, I can do so. I have magic powers. Hello, Elizabeth. See,
Hello,
I make.
Syl.
How are you today? How are you
I'm
today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm wonderful. I'm wonderful. I'm even more wonderful now that you are here. This is a great joy.
Oh,
So, Ramsey, is it not just too delightful and wonderful to hear Elizabeth, capital H here?
hello, Ramsey.
Yes, yes. It's so cool. It's so cool. Elizabeth, I will intuit. I'll take a chance a little bit and guess that you have something that you wish to ask, share, communicate.
Yes, yes, I do. I had a question.
Yes, listening.
It's the first page, and I need to go look at my screenshot of it.
The
It
the, the
says,
quote.
it says, a greater and more reliable order is in play when it ceases trying to impose order and
Oh,
instead
yes, this
follows
is.
order.
Yeah, here we go. Here we go. It's on screen now, right? So Comelius says, although I don't think you said this, a greater and more reliable order is in play, right? But he says that's not the full sentence. He says that order is in play when it ceases trying to impose order and instead follows order. It's a ridiculously layered and sophisticated comment from Comelius. So what was your question there about it?
Oh, it just strikes me in a very strong way. And it
Oh,
reminded me also of what we were talking about in a prior session regarding my interpretation of surrender. And you were saying that you didn't understand my interpretation of
right,
surrender.
right,
And
right, right.
this is it.
Yes, yes, yes.
This is
Well,
it when
yes,
you're
yes,
ceasing to
yes,
cease
yeah,
to make your own way, and you give that
yes,
up
yes,
for the
yes,
greater way.
yes. Yeah, I mean, I do understand how you use the word surrender. I just didn't understand it in the context of attunement, the
Okay.
connectivity. It was a very
Oh,
particular thing that was, but I do get what you say with it, and
oh,
that's what in that discussion I was sort of saying surrender, attunement. They very much the same things. There's slight tweaky differences depending on how you use the word. But yeah, go ahead.
yes, very slight difference, and they are
Right,
different. But I wanted
correct.
to use this example for my
Yeah,
question because
yeah.
we were talking the other day about what Cher and Bina had mentioned regarding Attunements and
Mm, mm.
standing your own ground.
Yes,
And so this is the part where I have made some compromises or mistakes
in the
because of
past.
this.
Yeah.
Yes, because of not understanding where the line is when you're in
Yes,
attunement, or you're desiring
yes,
to be in attunement, right? But
yes.
you give up what it is that you're um, trying to make happen or see through till the end for the sake of the greater
Yes,
good. Do you see what I'm
yes.
saying?
Oh, absolutely. And I love
Okay.
this. So now we are going to really essentially pause here and stop here, right? Well, because I want to go into this sentence, this line, and as you are saying it, into absolute, thorough, full detail. We're going to come to resolution on it. So the first things that come up for me is I want to take that sentence a little bit more and take it in the context of the new nobles in the conference, right? And he says there's an order that comes into play when it ceases trying to impose order. So the first thing is those new nobles in the conference, they weren't looking to impose order. They weren't saying you've got to have this name, you've got to have that, right? They were letting things run as they ran, right? And then this more reliable order that comes into play is the order of appropriateness, the order of ethics, yeah, the order of impeccability, which is to say we don't want to waste, which forces them to do something that they might not otherwise do, right? So now they in a sense manipulate, but are they manipulating in the typical sense of manipulation where there's an agenda? No, they are doing so because if they don't do it, they can be held to account. Somebody afterwards could say, how come you guys did not jump in and make sure we got a name? You knew, you saw where it was going. You knew you could act, and yet you didn't. And now we sit without this whole a federation, this whole communion, or this whole collection of plans. We don't have a structure. All that work went to pot. You guys knew, you saw it, you were aware. So this is where the later explanation of Biella comes in, where she says, there is the responsibility when you have awareness. It's not just about your actions, but also your non-actions. So their non-actions can be seen as a manipulation also, because they're aware of it. It's a choice, correct? If
Yes,
they if they
but if
didn't
all of
act, could somebody would saying, well, you manipulated the conference by not acting. Yeah.
by not acting.
Right, right, right. So that's just a manipulation point. We'll come back to that, but I want to set it aside because I want to go by this order, right? So now what they did is as individuals, you could say they were absolutely in attunement with the flow of the conference. Yes. because they saw it was going, they saw where it was going, they were practicing extrapolation and anticipation, and they were so in attunement that they could feel the vibe, the energy, the psychologies of the delegates, the participants, so they really were in full attunement with it. Now, did they try to impose any kind of an order? No, they were letting it run according to its own thing. But now we come to the specificness of their actions. Yes, where they were acting independently, right? And yet they were also acting as a group, right? There wasn't a plan laid out, but whoever started this cued the rest to, hey, follow me, right? I got a plan here. And so he's cueing them, but they don't know what his plan is. So part of the more reliable order, that's not an imposed order, is trust. He didn't have to say, hey, trust me. That's the deeper order that's part of their community, right? They trust the sensibility, the sobriety, the thoughtfulness. And I don't have a plan. You acting, you must have a plan. See, now this greater order comes in without specifically trying to impose it. He's not telling them what to do, but they just go along with it because they trust that deeper order, right? It's a big deal. Now, when we look at this in the context of surrender and attunement, where is the difference? Not any one single one of those other new nobles surrendered. Why is the difference so? Because surrender implies, or typically in the usage of the word, means giving up your individual agency. And that is the difference between surrender and attunement. They didn't give up their agency. They reserved that. They held it in mind. They went along with what he was doing. But at any point in time, should they have said, wait a second, what you're doing here is not good, not right, they would have stopped going along with it, right? And chosen some other path. Right. Now, of course, they have that trust that in their fellows, they trust the sensibility even if they can't see it, right? So they may not do that initially, but they reserve that right. They're still choosing to go along with it. So nobody can say afterwards, yeah, but you just went along with it. So you chose, right? And they would say, yes, I'm responsible. If it didn't work out, they would take full responsibility. But when you surrender, you will say, well, yeah, but I surrendered to the situation. Am I responsible? See, so surrender has this implication of, or meaning, not implication, a meaning of giving up your own personal agency, your own personal determination, your own volition, right? Surrender is completely giving over, right? When you surrender to the enemy, you say, you are in charge of me now. I am no longer in charge of me, right? I
So
don't decide.
are you
Make
saying
sense?
then, yes, I think so. Are you saying then that when you are in attunement, you will not be expected to do anything inappropriate?
Absolutely. 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 According
It
to
would
you,
all
right?
be, it would all
Correct.
be used for the good of the situation.
Exactly. Exactly. Now, depends what we are in attunement with. Of course, in our current political situation, I don't care which side you are on. If you're in attunement with the political party and its political structure, you are at some point going to be party to things that are inappropriate. Because even in the nicest of parties, there are individuals who have their own particular agendas, and yes, fine, the party as a whole might be good, but this particular individual is looking to feather their pocket, or their constituents at the expense of others and stuff like that, right? Or they just misguided, and like, all right, climate change, right? You may have the party that's in favor of it generally, but particular members might not be, right? And so on and so forth, right? So when we are in attunement with human things, this is problematic in terms of the appropriateness, right? So that's a different thing. So when we are using attunement in general, we are talking about being connected to universal intent. and the absolute overall greater force of things. So attunement is not really so on a local level. Like, if we're saying I'm going along, that's just going along with politics. I'm subscribing to it. I'm part of it. I'm part of a project, etc. Right? I'm collaborating. I'm cooperating, etc. Those are more terms to use. But attunement, at least for the new nobility and from a way of impeccability point of view, specifically means connecting to the intent of the universe via its materialization in the world around us, via how it gets expressed in the wind, in the weather, in the behavior of people, in patterns of taste and like and trends and so on and so forth, right? Or economies, whatever. Everything is a mechanism for the expression of intent, right? So when we are in attunement with it, we are going along with the flow of things from the universal perspective, not the human perspective, yes, or the sentient perspective. So it's attunement is definitely got that spiritual implication to it. Yes, the deeperness. You're connecting to the deeper energy. Now you can surrender to that, but doesn't this go against the entire intent of the universe, which is to generate, to enhance, stimulate, develop awareness? If you surrender, you said of giving up and say, I don't know, I'm just going along with you. You can't give up your own thinking. You can't surrender your thinking, your ability to grow and learn and be aware. So always we get called upon to do our own part as much as we can. But when we come to the limits of our capabilities, right, and our learning, that's when we get the assistance from externally, from outside of us. This is the magic of attunement. It is to take us into moreness, not to substitute for us doing things on our own. Does that make sense?
It does. I'm seeing it a bit like synchronization.
Yes. Yes.
And
Synchronicity comes into it in some ways. Yes. In other words, synchronicity is just basically getting ridiculously lucky, like impossibly lucky. And the universe will help us out. Yes. Yes.
okay, thank you, Syl. I have to leave Zoom because I have to go back.
Oh, no
I
problem.
just had a few minutes
I
here
love
and
it.
I
I
wanted
love it.
to
I
ask
love
that
it. I love it.
question.
I love it.
So
I
I
love it.
will go back to listening.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
I'm going to continue on this theme because we just
Okay.
started and there's a lot more that I want to explain on it or just share on it. And it's not really explaining; it's more sharing. So I love that you came just quickly. This is fantastic. All right, bye bye,
I will
Elizabeth. Bye bye. No,
comment
no,
if
yeah.
I'm able to type.
Please,
So
yes,
thank you.
yes. I
Much
love it. I love it.
appreciated.
Too
Okay.
magical. I'm so pleased you came, though. This is magical. This is very cool.
Oh,
Very cool.
thank you, Syl.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Bye
Bye
bye.
bye. Bye bye, Elizabeth. Bye bye, Elizabeth. This is too cool. This is too cool. So this key point that we are saying, the difference between surrender and attunement is one, I'm giving up my individual responsibility. Surrender says I'm no longer responsible for what happens to me. It's all in whatever's hands. Yes. So if I'm sailing in the wind, in the storm, yes, I'm still working my sails. I'm working my rudder. I'm trying to do as best I can to survive the storm. At some point, you surrender the storm and say, okay, storm, whatever, blow me where you're going to blow me. See, I've given up responsibility for where things take me. And this is not attunement. Attunement is to say, yes, fine. The storm is, coming my way. Yes, I can run in front of the storm, use the storm's energy to move away from the storm. Yes, but I am deciding to do this. I'm not surrendering to it. I'm utilizing the energy of the storm to best effect. Yeah. Now, does this get me to my goal? No, because my goal was where the storm was coming from. So I have to go around the storm. Yeah. But I'm still not giving up my responsibility of what it is that I needed to do. Now, it may be that my agenda was amiss and the storm blows me so far, of course, despite my best efforts, that I end up in a whole different continent. And I say, well, you know what? Maybe the universe is trying to tell me something that I'm really need to be here rather than there. Now I reevaluate. Now I reevaluate. I consider my old agendas, my old goals, and I now have new information because I'm in a new confidence that I didn't know existed before. Say, well, what was the point of my own thing? My old thing was, well, let's just assume that I'm the oldest day sailor. Well, I was going to this continent because I was looking for, let's just say, lumber, right? And I heard that, well, never mind the old continent, just, going to there. I knew there were trees and lumber there, but hey, on this new continent, there's even more trees and more lumber, and there's no competition here. Well, duh. Thank you. Thank you. Instead of me battling with all the other traders for the lumber in the old place there, which was scarce, and well, now I've got abundance here. Okay, cool. So I changed my plans. But I changed them based on the new information brought about via attunement. Yes. So by going along with forces rather than fighting them, sometimes we get to where we didn't know we were going. We get to where we didn't know we were going. But actually, we are going there. We did want to go there. We just didn't know it was a possibility, right? So either way supplies my objective, but not in the specifics. And this is the key with the universe, right? It supplies your deeper intents. The precise how that's our imaginations. We don't always know the best way. We kind of do the best we can, but sometimes we need more. And this is the magic of attunement. It brings you more information, and then you need to adapt with that. But it has to be choice. If it's not choice, the universe won't help you, because then the universe is assisting you in giving up your agency, your awareness, your deliberation, and won't work, right? So you always have to maintain that deliberateness, that choice, yeah? And it's all about enhancement of awareness. So there's this deeper order. When we follow the order of intent to awareness, everything starts to fall into place, right? And this is when we have this as our agenda rather than our petty agendas, our sub-agendas, the agendas of survival, wealth, success, whatever, right? Even happiness can fall to the wayside next to the attent to awareness, because I might have a little bubble circumstance where I'm very happy, right? But it's a bubble and it's very fragile. It's very vulnerable. The universe is going to say, nope, sorry. Yeah, you may be happy right now, but your situation is very fragile. The slightest thing can come and disrupt your bubble, and then you stuck. Then you won't have any way of being happy, surviving, doing anything, because your bubble has been popped. Yeah. So this is very key to understand, that when it comes to the universe, it prioritizes awareness above all else. Above all else. And when we follow that order, everything else starts to have an order. Yeah. That's the more reliable order, the order of the intent of the universe. And we stop trying to impose our own petty agendas, which we think these are ideal. We think these are the best, but we really have no clue. I mean, especially in the context of the superiority paradigm, when we shift to alternative paradigms, like, for instance, the learning paradigm, and especially if we see learning as play. Wow. Well, learning, what does learning mean? Enhancement of awareness. Oh, okay, brilliant. And my play, what's my play's purpose? Enhancement of awareness, learning. Oh, brilliant. So now I'm in attunement with the universe, and everything starts to work out. Yeah, everything starts to work out. It's quite profound. It's quite profound. So the day started for me on greater order. At least this session, this live started. I shared it with Ramsey, but I'm going to share again. So let me go. Yeah, I think, and then yeah. So when I shared the live to my timeline, it comes live in the group, and then I share it to the guide. I pin it to featured, and then I also share it. I go share, and then I just post to my timeline over here, right? When it comes up, see, share now public, which puts it on my timeline. So when I go here, which is going to my timeline, and I say, okay, I pinned Sunday's one, and here's today's one, right? This is what we're busy with now. See, it says live, right? But then before I just added in, I come here to add in this on top, right? All the way you can read it and all the moreness, right? And the stuff. And then I saw, oh, wait a second, this was on my timeline. As my brother posted this. And well, he just put the 4 photos, but he made a second one, the building across the road from home, right? Well, this is Nobelia spelled with an I, but I can't imagine it being pronounced much different to Nobelia. Maybe Nobelia, maybe. Yeah, but I hope it's Nobelia, Nobility, yeah, see, so projects. I mean, the this is the part of the Moreness project, the nobleness project. It's all part of it. So, uh, and now I'm relating this to this greater order. When we set an intent to awareness, things come along to assist and stimulate. So, my brother's never come to any of the lives, but at least he has an idea that this is relevant. So he's paying attention somewhere. Thank you. So yeah, you're welcome, Francois. Come anytime. Come join. Come on Zoom. Comment. Yeah. So it's sharing. It's saying there's moreness here. For me, this is, if I were him, I'd be paying attention. This is the universe saying, pay attention, Francois, pay attention. There's more here, right? And this is now that deeper order starting to press upon our personal order, right? His personal order is his likes, his interests, whatever he's doing. He say, I don't have time for Syl, or you may call me Leon, which, used to be what, well, it still is, I guess, but, I've been called Syl for so long by the nickname that I don't even hear the other one anymore. He said, I don't have time for Syl and his stuff. I'm busy with my stuff. But this is the universe talking to you, right? The deeper order saying, hey, pay attention. There's something in it for you. Yes. Because this is for him. This is right across from his home. The anomalousness of it being right there across from the road from him. What are the odds? What are the odds? I've never seen this anywhere, right? This spelling, this name like this, right? Never seen it anywhere. So this is, and projects on top of it. See, it's double. Anomalies always have these statistical outriders anomaly, one on top of another on top of another, because, statistically you can have something happen that, is statistically way on the edge of stuff. Okay, duh. That happens. That happens all the time. It doesn't make it something special. But when it's 2, 3, 4 of them compounded, then yes. Yeah. Like at some point, this word, nobelia, nobleness, as a place, right? Like this is going to happen at some point. And so that's not so unusual. But it's unusual that I've never seen it, one, right? And it's not around very often. Secondly, what is unusual, it's across the way from him, from his home. And third, it's got projects to it. You got 3 profound unusualnesses. Yeah. It's very amazing. And also look at too, the other thing too, if we look a little bit, I never had a chance to look at the pictures yet. There's clearly an effort to communicate sophistication. Yes? Or is it just me? Okay, he's now showing the greater environment. Yeah. See, Nobelia. Not a very imposing, building necessarily, yes. But when we looked back at this, at the actual, see the doors, right? And this window here. This is very nicely done, very neat, the little plant with a tree in it, an attempt at moreness, in other words. Or is it just me reading things into it? Yeah, but to me, it seems like, wow, they really made an effort to be sharp. And that gold color, it's a color I favor too. Yes. See, I use this color. This is on my old blog, the background color, it's part of the same color theme that I try to use. Now it's limited by what I can do in terms of the software, but certainly as a choice color, that would be the color that Nobelia would go for, sun color, right? So there's a lot in this, yeah, a lot. Even the door has this, and the handle on the door. So very, very cool, very, very amazing. I want to hear more on this. I hope he watches the video. And this is it's very special. It's very, very special. There's a magic involved. So I'm saying from the order of things, yes, we need to pay attention to it from where it is outside our personal order, which is, our jobs, our family, the usual, our survival stuff, right? Our home comfort, all the stuff, right? That's our personal order. you could say, yeah. And our personal order is also our beliefs, our attitudes, our mindsets, etc. Yeah. And attunement and that greater order, when we set aside, when we cease trying to impose our order. The key is in that phrase from Comelius is the word impose. It doesn't mean you let go your order, but I don't insist this is the only option and trying to force it, to impose it on the world. No. When I cease trying to do that, then I start to see the bigger order come through. And that's what happens with most people. Watch them. They are imposing their personal ideas, beliefs, mindsets, attitudes. In other words, their personal order. That's how their lives are ordered. They're trying to impose it, impose it, impose it. But when they stop doing that and connect to the universe and start to say, that doesn't mean you're surrendering, right? Which is giving up your responsibility. But when you start to look at the greater flow, like my brother now, if you were to say, whoa, this is an external output, right? It's drawing my attention to Nobelia. How do you not come and pay attention to these lives, to the story? He may not come to the lives, but certainly watch the replays, read the story, right? How can you not? Does that make sense? I'm really asking very seriously. It's not, I'm not just looking to ask by way of making sure that my explanation has been sufficient. That's typically why I ask. But I really want to know if my comment here, that for my brother, that if it were you, Ramsey, or you, Elizabeth, would you take the seeing that across the way from you? Right? And it's obviously a new thing, or unless he's just become recently aware of Nobelia. I don't know, either way. Would you take that as a prompt, as a stimulus from the universe to come and pay more attention to the story? I want to know. I really want to know. I'm keen to hear. I'm very keen to hear. That is really something special, but it connects to our discussion about this. A greater and more reliable order is in play when it ceases trying to impose order. Now, Comelius's language is a little rough here, but that's the magic of his expression, that it forces us, it's the way the universe works, it forces us to make sense of it, right? So this he's saying the order itself doesn't try to impose order, it just lets it happen, right? This is intent. Intent doesn't force it, it doesn't impose order, it just allows it to happen. And intent works of its own accord, however is most appropriate. It's not an imposition. When you try to impose your intent, it stops being an intent. Then it's specific actions, correct? That's the whole point of an intent, that it's not a specific application or implementation, right? And it follows the order of intent. And since the universe is intent, now we start to understand that the universe doesn't say, do this, do that. Hey, Syl, you know what? Go to the supermarket. It just has this greater intent of awareness, and whatever I'm going to be doing and following along with the pressures of the life and the flow of things and how they go and adjusting to this. It's like it's like I'm paddling in the river. If I want to go to the bank, well, fine. If I want to actually go with the flow of the thing, I have to make that effort to be in it. It's not that complicated. Yes. So the key is to understand what the intent of the order is. If we understand it is to enhance and develop and stimulate and further awareness, then our life becomes very simple. Yes. Look at in my brother's case. If he looks at it from a more regular point of view, he might say, well, this is a nice coincidence. Okay, it's a synchronicity. I may have been watching, he may have seen my post come up on his timeline and he saw Nobelia there mentioned somewhere. Oh, okay, this is a fun coincidence. And leave it at that. But if he sees the greater order as being the enhancement of development of awareness, oh, now this takes on a whole other significance. Now it becomes a clue, an anomaly. It becomes almost a little bit of a pressure, right? It's like the bend in the river or the waterfall in the river, something that you need to take heed of. Yeah. Like I said, I want to know from you guys, if you were my brother, How would you respond to that? If you were, and he's not coming to the lives, I don't know if he's reading the story. I kind of doubt it. I don't think, but maybe. I don't know. I don't want to presume. But would this not mean, hey, pay more attention? From an attunement point of view, what would seeing that name like that across the road from you, what would it signify to you, Ramsey? What would it mean to you, Elizabeth? I'm very keen to hear. And Norma, if you, yeah, I don't know. Norma's not online anymore, so maybe not. Well, Elizabeth also went offline. Oh, there, Norma's back online. So, are you here, Norma? Are you here? I want to hear. I want to hear. I want to hear. Anyway, for anybody on the replay, please let me know that if you are my brother, and in the context here, let's assume my brother's not particularly paying attention to the story. I mean, he's not coming to the lives, he's not commenting, he's not said anything to me about it, not in email or any personal message, anything like that, right? So if he is connecting to the story, he's doing so completely individually. But let's just assume that he isn't. Yes, he's aware, because otherwise he wouldn't have posted it. He's aware of Nobelia and the story, but he's not necessarily involved in it. Would that not then mean, if you were in that situation where you're aware of this story, you're aware of Nobelia more or less, however vaguely or accurately, doesn't matter. Would this not say be more involved, pay more attention? It's very, very powerful. Very, 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 very powerful. All right. I suspect everybody's had to go. Elizabeth just went offline, and Ramsey, you're not responding to the comments. So I suspect you've got things to do too. So I'm going to leave the question in case you're hearing it and come back. What did we learn today? What was revealed? What was shared? What was clarified? What was expressed? What is left unsaid? What is still unclear? Right? Let's do a takeaway of the session. For me, my takeaway is this understanding that the greater order that is in play is intent, and intent doesn't try to impose an order, but follows the order which is intent. So order takes different meanings when we look at it in this context. But when we just take out Comelius's peculiar expression, which is a little convoluted, this is the way he expresses things, and we rather say, what does this mean to me? It means that when I understand intent, intent takes things in the direction of the intent, but not in very precise, detailed, specific ways. It doesn't push you to say precisely go here and that, because that is, in a sense, forcing you to do so. It leaves you to choose. It leaves you to choose because it wants you to choose. Why? The intent is to get you to choose, because choice, capital C, choice is the same as awareness. So the intent of intent is to get us to choose, which makes us more aware. Yeah. So when we understand this, it changes a whole different understanding. And yes, I can surrender to it. I can surrender to the intent of the universe, but the intent of the universe says that you need to maintain your agency. You need to maintain your choice. So I can surrender sort of, but not truly fully, because I cannot give up that responsibility of making choices. Then I go against the universe's logic. It doesn't want automatons. It doesn't want blind slaves. It wants thoughtful, independent awareness, right? Capability in its own right. So there's a nuance and a double layer to this. Yes, follow the greater order, but also maintain your individuality. Yes. So that's why surrender doesn't quite work as a term in this case, yeah, because surrender means giving it up totally. So yes, we can say, look, I'm totally in attunement to the universe. I do whatever the universe says, but the universe says choose, think. See? So I'm not totally doing it, even though I am doing it. It's a coexisting contradiction. Attunement is a coexisting contradiction. It's a collaborative conundrum, as Erica Jane loves to say. Right? It's a collaborative conundrum. It's a conundrum, but it collaborates, it works together. Yeah. So we totally surrender, but at the same time we maintain our agency, maintain our responsibility, our deliberation, our thought. So I'm keen to hear more. I'm keen to hear you guys' takeaways on this. Yeah. And also to pay attention to expression, to language, another takeaway for me. Like in this case, order. In the sentence, Comelius is using order 3 times, each time differently. We need to start really paying attention to this, and that even within the same sentence, a word can have 3 different meanings because it's contextual. Yes, and they leverage off of each other. And it's very, very important if we are going to get sophisticated with our understanding to understand abstract conceptuality. Way of Impeccability's other name is the language of conceptuality. Yes, it has its own structure, abstract thinking. It has its own methodologies and mechanisms and understandings. And when we learn that, it changes how we are able to grasp information in a much more profound way. Not just information, but concepts, understandings, because we don't want to just be gathering information. Yes, that's useful, and knowing how to organize information is very, very useful. But taking that information and transforming it into concepts, into understandings, into learnings, and ultimately into doings, that's where the real value lies, right? When it becomes awareness, in other words, right? Capital A awareness. Very, very, very powerful. Ramsey, anything before I go? As I think it's just you and me left here. Just you and me. No? Very, very wonderful. Wow, 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 wow. The time went so quickly too. It just amazes me. I was like thinking we just started. I really, it feels to me like we've been going for maybe 15 minutes, at most 10 minutes maybe. But that's my sense of time. I worked very hard on having a flexible sense of time. It's very profound. It's very useful, very, very powerful. Most magical. So anybody watching the replay, share your takeaways, share your thoughts, share your insights, share your understandings. Yes. Share anything, questions, alternative expressions. Say, wow, I don't get this. Makes no sense. Let's come at it again. Right. Because sometimes the word, like I feel the word surrender likely means what I mean by attunement for Elizabeth. I don't think for her surrender means completely and utterly giving up your agency. Maybe, maybe not. I want to find out. Yeah, but that's what the word typically means. So I was going on the typical meaning rather than the individual meaning for Elizabeth. Yes. So this is an important part of communication. So I didn't have time to ask. I did want to ask her more on it specifically, to what it means to her personally. Right. And so share this, share. That's what your dictionary of power is for, where you put in surrender there and you write out the extended understanding. You give synonyms to it as well. Right. It's very, very powerful technique. And then attunement and what this means. It takes time sometimes takes years. Ask Sean on impeccability. We're still busy understanding what impeccability is for sure, right? Or understanding and grasp of it. It's profound. It always updates. It always updates. It's a very magical thing. I updated my ability to express what impeccability is recently too, right? We're always learning. We're always learning. It's very, very powerful. So please share your takeaways, share your thoughts. Takeaways is the value you take away, the things you want to take and apply and use. Yeah. But sometimes they come up takeaways, random connectivities that we don't quite see yet how they came. Share those too. Many different kinds of takeaways. Yeah. Share it all. Share, share, share. Very, very powerful. All right. Yeah, I think Ramsey had to drop off also likely. So, all right. On that note, I shall end it and I will see you all tomorrow. Yes. I know many are enjoying these replays, even though they don't come to the lives. So for anybody saying, well, so why are you bothering? Just 2 people came today. Doesn't matter. It's not only for the people who attend the lives, right? It's an ongoing thing. Plus, it goes up, it goes down, right? And it's not why I'm doing it. I'm not doing it because people are attending. I'm doing it because I'm sharing. Look at my brother. He's never participated in this. He's never once commented on any of the posts that I've made to this, and I've made tons by now, right? Yeah, he's getting a connectivity and a message. See, this is the power of putting things out via sharing. The universe takes a hand in things. Nothing to do with me. I don't have a personal agenda here, right? The only personal part of it, it's not even personal, came via the universe too, right? Is this agenda, this understanding that the paradigm needs shifting. This has been a theme in my life when this book, when it was a book, it's called The New Nobles, right? When I'd finished writing it, this was back in probably 2015, 2016, sometime. Yeah, 2015, 2016, right in that time period. And I was about to publish it and get everything was all ready to go. But then the universe really came and put pressure on me to write the book about bullshit and BMNs and narcissism and manipulation and all that, right? And then I was asked to write that book, yes, for somebody who was dealing with the BMN and said they want others to know how to deal with it. That they had the advantage of connecting with me, and I was, because they never had BMNs in their lives, and I explained the whole psychology to them, right? And they would post about it, and I took those posts and put them in as quotes, and then wrote out in detail what I was sharing with them, right? So they wanted me to write this book so that others could have something, that they wouldn't be in a situation like that, they wouldn't be lost, right? But see my point. Superiority paradigm came and said, hey, you need to take care of the superiority paradigm first before you share the Biella. The universe took a hand in that, right? And so now I am sharing Biella and nobility and nobelia as an alternative to the superiority paradigm, as an alternative. It's all part of attunement for me. There's nothing in it in a personal sense. If something comes, that's great, because typically the universe, when things come, multi-layered, right? But the agenda here is the universe's agenda, which started many years back already. My whole life is universal agenda. So it's just saying, though, when you look at the things in that bigger picture, it changes quite profoundly. And look how this post by my brother, well, two of them, double confirmation, right, is so profound in terms of the sharing. It's connecting. It's connecting with my brother to say, hey, when you with Syl isn't just, a memory from your childhood and stuff like that. There's something else going on here. Pay attention, pay attention, pay attention. Right now, that's my brother's making this obvious that this is happening, and I suspect it's happening for others also. Right? He just made the effort to connect it, at least to post about it, right? Because it's so pertinent, so particular. But this is the magic of sharing. It comes through in ways we don't know. And when you follow a universal intent and an agenda and an attunement, you can't always see how things are going to work. So a lot of trust involved as well, right? So I'm not giving up my agency. I do the best I can within what I know. Like I've been tasked to share. I don't know what the end result of the sharing is, but I can't just go and do it any old way. I've got to do it to the best of my ability, be impeccable in my sharing, be thorough, be diligent, be scrupulous, be impeccable, in other words. Yes. So it all works together. It's a very magical system when we understand it. That's the key, when we understand it. It's not a simple system. It is, but it isn't. Like language. Once you know how to speak language, it's pretty simple. But learning it, not so much. Yeah. Takes time. Takes time. It all works together. It all works together. Brilliant. All right. I will see you guys tomorrow. On that note, I will leave. I just love it. I just love it. I just love it. My voice wants a break too, I think. So, all right. Bye-bye, everybody. Bye-bye, 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 bye-bye. Too fantastic. Too fantastic.